You ever notice how much we love to frame the world in simple choices? It's either good or it's evil. It's us or it's them. Right or wrong. There's something, I don't know, kind of satisfying about it, right? It's comforting to take this messy, complicated world and just boil it all down to a straight-up either-or choice. But what if that instinct, that seduction of simplicity, is actually hiding a much deeper, more fascinating truth from us? Okay, let's get into it.
And you see this pop up everywhere, especially with the biggest questions we've ever tried to answer. Are we just a product of our genes or our childhood? Do we actually pilot our own lives, or are we just puppets of cause and effect? Is your mind just your brain, or is it something more? For centuries, we've treated these like they're battles to be won, where one side has to come out on top.
I mean, think about the classic nature versus nurture debate. On one side, you've got this idea that our genes are basically our destiny, a fixed blueprint that decides who you're going to be. And on the other side, there's this idea of the blank slate, that we're born with nothing preloaded and our experiences write the entire program. Both are powerful, compelling ideas that seem totally incompatible. Or so it seems.
Or how about free will? One school of thought says, yes, we are absolutely the authors of our own story. When you face a choice, you genuinely could pick the other option. You're the pilot. But then, the counterargument, determinism, says that every single thing that happens, including you choosing your breakfast, is the inevitable result of everything that came before. In that view, the universe has a script, and we're just puppets acting it out. Okay, but this is where we have to hit the pause button and ask a really important question. What if these aren't actually battles to be won? What if forcing an either-or choice is the wrong way to even think about the problem in the first place? In this explainer, we're going to look at a totally different way of thinking, one that moves past these simple choices to find a more powerful and, honestly, a more accurate truth.
All right, so let's dive into our first case study, which gets at that ancient question, what makes us who we are? Are we born a certain way, locked in by our genetic code, or are we shaped and molded into who we become by the world around us?
What's so fascinating is how the pendulum of scientific thought has just swung wildly back and forth on this. Way back in 1690, John Locke's blank slate theory put all the emphasis on nurture. Then the 19th century comes along, and with evolutionary theory, the pendulum swings all the way back to instinct and nature. But then the 1920s hit, behaviorism takes over, and whoosh, it's right back on the nurture side again. Today, though, we're finally landing somewhere new.
And this quote right here from John B. Watson, this is like the absolute peak of the pure nurture argument. He made this incredibly bold claim that he could take any baby and, with the right environment, turn them into anything, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. It's a really powerful statement, but it's important to remember that even Watson himself admitted he was going beyond my facts to make a point. It was a provocation in a very long debate.
So, to get this right, we have to understand a word that gets thrown around all the time. Heritability. And honestly, it's one of the most misunderstood concepts out there. When you hear a trait is, say, 60% heritable, that does not mean that 60% of your personality comes from your genes. What it actually means is that 60% of the differences we see across a whole population can be traced back to genetic differences in that group. It's a subtle point, but it's absolutely critical. And all of this leads us to where we are today, a much more elegant understanding. The big idea is that we're not born or made, we're born and made. Our genes and our environment are locked in this constant dance. And this saying just nails it. Genetics might load the gun, but it's our environment that often pulls the trigger. It's not one or the other. It's the interaction between them that really tells the story.
Okay, so let's take this both and thinking and apply it to our next big showdown. This one moves from our biology to the nature of the mind itself, and specifically our memories. Are memories physical objects, like files stored in the hardware of our brain? Or are they something else entirely?
It sounds like such a simple question, doesn't it? Where are your memories? You'd probably point to your head and say, in there? But when scientists actually try to pin down the precise location of one single memory, the whole picture just gets incredibly blurry and complicated. This simple question cracks open a huge debate about mind versus matter.
To try and get a handle on this, we've always used metaphors from the latest technology. The ancient Greeks imagined memory like a wax tablet getting an impression. Plato pictured it as a giant bird cage, where remembering was like trying to catch a specific bird. Later, it became a library, then a filing cabinet, and, of course, today, we think of it as a computer's hard drive. But all of these metaphors share one core idea.
And that core idea is that memories are things. They're physical traces, sometimes called engrams, that are stored in a specific place inside the brain structure. This is the machine perspective, that the mind is just a product of the brain's mechanics and memories are the files it saves. For a long time, the holy grail of neuroscience has been to find that filing cabinet. But if you really want to test an idea, you have to look at the most radical alternatives. And one of the most famous comes from the biologist Rupert Sheldrake, who basically challenges the entire foundation of that idea. He asks, what if the brain isn't a storage device at all? What if we've been using the wrong metaphor for centuries? This is the ghost perspective, the idea that something non-physical, something non-local is going on.
So Sheldrake comes up with this powerful new analogy. He says, think of it this way. The brain isn't a VCR that stores the movie. It's a TV set that tunes into a broadcast that's already out there in the world. So in this view, if someone has brain damage, it doesn't mean the memory file got deleted. It just means the tuner is broken, so it's harder to pick up the signal. It's a wild and definitely controversial way to reframe the whole question.
So where does this leave us? Well, the synthesis here is really about intellectual humility. Both the filing cabinet model and the TV tuner model are just that. They're models. They're maps that we're using to try to navigate this unbelievably complex territory of the mind. And the most important thing to remember is that the map is not the territory. Our models are incredibly useful tools, for sure, but the true nature of consciousness is still one of the great unanswered questions in all of science.
All right, on to our third and final great debate, the puzzle of free will. And this one really takes the both and challenge to a whole new level, because it basically puts physics and philosophy on a direct collision course. Are we really free agents, the pilots of our own lives, or is that powerful feeling of freedom just an elaborate illusion?
Okay, so here's the fundamental clash. From the point of view of physics, an idea called physical determinism suggests that if you knew the exact state of every particle in the universe at one moment, you could, in theory, predict the entire future. There's only one possible path forward. But from our human perspective, our most basic feeling is that we could have chosen the coffee instead of the tea this morning, that other options were really available, and those two ideas seem impossible to reconcile.
But this is where a really cool concept from the philosopher Christian List comes in handy. It's called a gential possibility. The basic idea is that you have to use the right level of description for the thing you're talking about. So yeah, maybe only one sequence of events is possible down at the tiny micro level of quantum physics, but that's not the level we live on. From our perspective as an agent making a choice, multiple futures are genuinely possible.
And that right there leads to an amazing synthesis. Free will isn't something you're going to find by looking at quarks and electrons. It's what's called an emergent, higher-level phenomenon. It exists at the level of psychology, of human action. And by shifting our frame of reference, we can see how it's possible to be a puppet of physics at the micro level while still being the pilot of our choices at the macro level we actually experience. The two truths can exist at the same time.
So we've looked at three totally different, really deep questions, and we keep ending up in a similar spot. We start with a simple either-or, and we find our way to something much richer. Well, there's actually a name for this way of thinking, and it's a powerful tool you can use for just about anything.
It's called the paradox perspective, and instead of feeling like you have to choose between two competing ideas, this perspective makes you ask a much better question. How can both of these seemingly opposite things be true? How can we work with both A and B at the same time? It's about swapping the tension of an argument for the creativity of a paradox.
So let's tie it all together and look at our big questions through this new lens. We are not born or made, we are born and made, through the interaction of our genes and our world. Our mind isn't a ghost or a machine, our consciousness is an emergent property, a synthesis of both structure and something more. And we are not puppets or pilots, we are determined at one level of reality and we are genuinely free at another. It was never either or, it was both and all along.
And look, this way of thinking isn't just for scientists and philosophers. It's a really practical tool. So the last thought I want to leave you with is this. Think about the tensions in your own life, in your work, your relationships, your own beliefs. Where have you set up a false either-or choice for yourself? And what amazing new possibilities might open up if you just asked, how could this be an and?